All right, let's get into it. Because if you thought we covered all the strange characters who buy Porsches in part 1, let me stop you right there. We barely scratched the surface. There's a whole other layer of these guys out there. People who picked their model for reasons even they don't fully understand, though anyone who watches them for 5 minutes understands perfectly. And today, we're going after them. 8 more models, 8 more profiles that you probably know, or that maybe, and I mean maybe, you are yourself without realizing it. So get comfortable, because this one's good. We start with number 8, the Porsche Boxster. And we need to be honest here, because the Boxster carries an unfair reputation. For years, it was the one everybody called the Porsche for guys who couldn't afford a 911. The little brother. The one bought by people who wanted the badge but not the price tag. And obviously, with a label like that hanging over you, the guy who rolls up in a Boxster already arrives with something to prove. What's interesting is who picks it anyway. Because the guy who chooses a Boxster is usually someone who stopped caring what other people think, but only halfway. He's the guy who tells you it's the purest Porsche, that the mid-engine layout gives perfect balance, that for canyon roads nothing else compares. And he's right about all of it. But then, when you ask him why he didn't just go for a Cayman, he goes quiet, because the Boxster convertible is a statement. He's the guy who wants to feel the wind, who wants to be seen, but also doesn't want to look like he wants to be seen. There's a very human contradiction in there. He's usually the professional who's just hit his 40s. Maybe he's coming out of a divorce or a gray stretch of life, and he decides that enough is enough, life is short, he deserves something beautiful. You see him on Sunday mornings on the canyon roads, with his mental aviator helmet on, convinced that today he's finally going to find himself. And you know what? Sometimes he actually does. The Boxster's need is permission. Permission to enjoy, to be a little frivolous, to stop being so serious. It's the car for guys giving themselves permission, and that, as strange as it sounds, goes deeper than it seems. Number 7, the Porsche Cayenne Turbo. And we have to separate this one clearly, because the regular Cayenne showed up in part 1, and that's a completely different animal. The Cayenne Turbo is another story entirely. Same chassis, same silhouette, but with 400 and something more horsepower, and an attitude that has nothing in common with the base model. The guy who buys a Cayenne Turbo is the guy who doesn't let you finish your sentence. He's the one who walks into meetings 5 minutes late and enters like the room was waiting for him, because usually the room actually was. He's an executive, an entrepreneur. He has teenage kids who hate his early schedule, a wife who stopped asking why he changed cars again, and a watch that costs more than the neighbor's entire car. The fascinating thing about the Cayenne Turbo guy is that he competes with himself. It's not enough to have a fast SUV, he wants it with the right logo, the right spec, the right wheels. He usually knows Nürburgring lap times by heart, even though he's never been on a racetrack in his life. He talks about the car like it's a tailored suit. And in a way it is, because this guy is buying the idea that he can have it all at the same time. Family, sport, work, image. The Cayenne Turbo tells the world, I don't have to choose. The need here is permanent conquest. There's no rest in this profile. There's always another thing to win, another time to beat, another meeting to get to first. And even though it can be exhausting to watch, you have to admit, the guy has energy. Number 6, the Porsche Macan GTS. And pay attention, because here's the nuance. The regular Macan also appeared in part 1, and that was the practical guy with aspirations. The Macan GTS is a different creature. It's usually driven by somebody a little younger, between their early 30s and late 40s. Urban professional, usually works in something like marketing, tech, finance, private medicine. Someone who already makes good money but doesn't quite feel like he's fully arrived yet. The Macan GTS is the car of transition. It's the moment where the guy doesn't want to drive just another premium German SUV anymore, but he's not emotionally ready yet for the full commitment of a 911. So he picks the GTS. He convinces himself it's the best combination of utility and sport. And again, technically he's not wrong, but if you listen to him talk about it, you'll notice he justifies a lot. A lot. He explains why he didn't buy a competing German sport SUV. He explains why he didn't go for a Cayenne. He explains why this is the perfect size for his life. And you nod along, but inside you're thinking, dude, you don't have to justify anything to me. It's your money. The Macan GTS guy's need is legitimacy. He wants to be taken seriously as a car enthusiast, not just as somebody who can afford a Porsche. That's why he orders the red brake calipers, the specific wheels, the sport package. He's building an identity in real time, and the car is the canvas. Number 5. The Porsche 911 Turbo S. And now we're changing registers completely. The 911 Turbo S is the car of the guy who already won. Not the guy who's winning, the guy who already won. He sold the company, he closed the round, he cashed the big bonus, that kind of thing. He's usually past his mid-40s, and he's figured out something the rest of the guys haven't figured out yet, that he doesn't need the GT3 to feel fast. The Turbo S is the car that accelerates faster than Italian exotics, costing 3 times as much. And it does it with air conditioning, ventilated leather seats, and a trunk big enough for the weekend. It's civilized brutality. The Turbo S owner has a very particular sense of humor because he's discovered that the real joy is in surprising people. He pulls up to a stoplight next to some loud Italian thing, and when the light goes green, the other guy has to swallow the fact that the quiet man in sunglasses, plain jacket, and a silver car just disappeared in 2 seconds. That face on the other driver is what the Turbo S gives him every single day. He doesn't need to shout it, it happens on its own. The need here is efficiency. Efficiency in everything. In work, in life, in cars. He doesn't want compromises, he doesn't want theater, he wants results. And the Turbo S is exactly that. A car without drama that does dramatic things. This is the silent winner archetype, and when you actually meet him, you realize he barely talks about cars. He talks about other stuff. Business, wine, travel. The car is just there, doing its job, like him. Number 4. The Porsche 968. And now we're going into the real weirdos. The deep cut crowd. Because the 968 is one of those models almost nobody brings up, and that already tells you a lot about who owns one. It's the evolution of the 944 from Part 1, but with more refinement, more power, and production numbers that are way more limited. The 968 owner is a nerd. Straight up, no softening. He's the guy who knows the complete history of the brand, the one who will explain to you why this model is unfairly overlooked, the one who has a garage with epoxy floors and better lighting than his actual living room. He's usually an engineer or some kind of technical professional, architect, programmer with net worth. He owns the car because he finds it fascinating as an object, not because he wants to impress anybody. In fact, when he takes it out for a drive, nobody knows what it is. People just think it's an old car. And he loves that because when somebody 1 in 1,000 walks up and says, "Oh my God, a 968, then a 40-minute conversation breaks out that the other guy didn't plan on having that day. The need here is knowledge. This profile values knowing over showing, and his car is a way to recognize his own tribe. It's a secret code. If you know what it is, he wants to talk to you. If you don't, he couldn't care less. Number 3, the Porsche 911 Targa. And I love this profile because it's pure romance with both feet on the ground. The Targa isn't for everyone. The guy who chooses a Targa when the Cabriolet and the Coupe are both right there is making a very specific statement. He's saying, I want the open air, but I also want the history. The Targa bar is one of the most iconic design elements in automotive history, and the guy who falls in love with that arch is a guy with aesthetic sensibility. He's the elegant surgeon in his early 60s. He's the family lawyer with his own firm. He's the architect with national awards on the shelf. He's usually older than the average Porsche owner, usually has more depth, more general culture, more vinyl records than video games. The Targa is a car for driving to the little town where the family house is, with jazz on the radio, thinking about things that already happened and things that still might. It's melancholy with 380 horsepower. The need here is continuity. This profile is at a point in life where he values things that last. And the Targa, with a design that's stayed basically intact for decades, connects him to something permanent. He isn't buying the car, he's buying the timeline. He's buying membership in a tradition, and that's something marketing can't manufacture. It can only recognize when it already exists inside somebody. Number 2, the Porsche Carrera GT, and I know a lot of you were waiting for this one. The Carrera GT is legend. It's the car that splits Porsche fans into two groups, the ones who love it to the point of obsession and the ones who treat it with almost religious respect. The guy who has a Carrera GT in his garage doesn't own it, he watches over it. Because this isn't a grocery-run car. This is a car you take out 3 times a year, very early in the morning, on empty or almost empty roads, drive it for 10 minutes, sweat, get a little scared, and put it back in the garage with your heart pounding. The typical owner is someone with very settled wealth, usually over 50, collector, connoisseur, and with one thing crystal clear, the monetary value of the car doesn't matter to him. What matters is what the car represents. The Carrera GT is one of the last cars built without electronic nannies apologizing for the excess. It's brutal, it's pure, it's dangerous. And the owner knows it. That's why he respects it. He doesn't do dumb things with it. He takes care of it like you take care of a historical artifact. Because at this point, it actually is one. The need here is communion. This profile is looking for an almost spiritual experience with the act of driving. He's not interested in going fast for the sake of going fast. He's interested in connecting with something very few human beings have ever felt, and the Carrera GT is a time machine back to that feeling. When he shows up at Cars and Coffee, a circle forms around the car, and the owner's off to the side, drinking his coffee, watching the others watch, with that half smile of a guy who knows he has something new money can't buy. Because owning a Carrera GT isn't just about money, it's about having reached the point in your life where you actually understand it. And now, number 1. The Porsche 959. Because if we're talking about the most marked profiles, the most stereotyped, the ones that when you see them you go, oh yeah, that's exactly that guy, the 959 takes the crown. The 959 isn't a car, it's a myth. Produced in ridiculously limited numbers in the late 80s, it was the most advanced car on the planet at the time. All-wheel drive, sequential turbos, active suspension, an engineering miracle. And today, owning one isn't buying a car, it's joining a fraternity. There are fewer than 300 in decent shape on the road worldwide. 300 on the entire planet. The 959 owner is a very specific creature. He's not just any rich guy, because any rich guy would buy a modern hypercar with bigger numbers on the spec sheet. The 959 is chosen by somebody with taste. Somebody who grew up staring at pictures of this car in magazines when he was a teenager, somebody who made his fortune in the 90s or the 2000s, and who now, in his mid-50s or 60s, can finally fulfill the dream that's been marinating in his head for 40 years. This is the profile of the kid who never left. On the outside, there's the responsible adult, the CEO, the founder, the family patriarch. But inside, there's a 12-year-old boy who saw the 959 on a poster and never got it out of his head. And now, with the adult's money, he fulfills the kid's dream. The need here is closure. Closing a circle that opened decades ago, telling the kid you used to be, look, we made it! And there's something deeply moving about that, because it's not arrogance, it's tenderness toward yourself. It's recognizing that what mattered back then was real, and that you deserve that dream now that you can pay for it. The 959 owner almost never shows off. He barely takes it out, he takes great care of it, and when somebody recognizes it, his face lights up in a way the other Porsches don't produce. Because this isn't the car of professional success. This is the car of reconciliation with yourself. This is the car that tells you you did it. And that's part 2. 8 more profiles, 8 more different ways of arriving at the same garage. Because if this brand proves anything, it's that there isn't just one way to love these cars. Each model attracts a very specific kind of human being, with his contradictions, his insecurities, his triumphs, and his unfinished business. And when you line them all up, what you have isn't a list of cars. It's a mirror of modern male psychology, the need to belong, to prove, to enjoy, to conquer, to reconcile. The car is just the wrapper. What's inside, always, is you. Tell me in the comments which of these 8 profiles you know, or which one you are. And if you recognized yourself in any of the 16 we've covered across both parts, don't worry about it. You're in good company. See you in the next one.